Hey there, YouTube. This is Super87 again. I'm bringing you another The Why episode, and this is about frogs and just frogs. Uh, the reason is because I could go on to a ton of different frog variants like frog monarchs and lancer frogs and other decks that would you would just stick the frog engine into, but I'm not gonna do that. I may save that for another episode, or may just leave it. But the frog engine in itself does a lot and is actually really big, and it kind of needs its own sort of episode and sort to go over with. And now frogs, traditionally, when they came out, they were supposed to be used for like desk frogs and like making using desk croaking and stuff like that. And it's supposed to be you get a few of these frogs out and then they do stuff. But then sort of the community kind of took what was good about it. Like at first, Treeborn Frog came out, and then people were using that for tributes. And then Swap and Dupe and Ronin came out, and people were also using that for just more extra tributes. It was just easier to get Treeborn and Frog in the grave. And then Xyz came out, Xyz Monsters, and then the Frog engine became a lot more broken than it really should have. But let's get into it. Now, first we have. I'm going to go into the big one first. Swap Frog. He is awesome, and he's designed really well, and is seriously one of the best support cards for any monster archetype that there is. And I'm going to tell you why. Uh, his stats are very low. He's level 2, like the rest of the ones we'll be using, except for Treeborn. He's water, like they all are. He's aqua, like they all are, and then he's only got 1,000 attack, which is okay. I mean, I've been able to get in a few pokes here and there with Swap Frog. It's not too bad, but his effect is the reason you're going to be using Swap Frog. Now, you can normal summon him, or he has his own built-in special summon uh, mode, which allows you to kind of turbo swap frogs onto the field and keep summoning them over and over again. But I'll get into how you can do that. So you can discard a water monster, and usually that'll be another frog or Ronin Totem to special summon it from your hand. And like I said, that's not actually required. You can either discard to special summon or you can normal summon. It's an optional thing. When this card is summoned at all, no matter how you summon it, you can select a level 1, level 2, or lower aqua type monster from your deck or your side of the field to the graveyard. Now, actually, that side of the field part is actually like kind of a effect everyone kind of forgot about. It actually can be used to your advantage to send things like Dupe and Poison Draw Frog from your field to the graveyard, but mostly the first part is the part you're going to be abusing. Like the second part is kind of once in a blue moon. Now that's where Swap Frog starts. You summon him to send your Ronin Totems and your Dupe Frogs and your other frogs to the grave so that they start setting up for your plays, setting up for your tributes or setting up for your rank 2s. Now, essentially, uh, like you'll sort of like want to prioritize getting Swap Frog into your hand because that's how you start going. Now, it has one last effect, and it is once per turn you can return one monster you control to your hand, including himself, to normal summon one frog monster except Swap Frog or Frog the Jam in addition to your normal summoner set this turn. Now, really, the reason you use this is not for the extra summon, but for the cost of the ability, which is returning one monster you control to your hand, and that is a cost. So that's how Swap Frog himself gets around Veiler. As I can summon Swap Frog, you can Veiler to prevent me from ditching a frog from my deck to the grave, but I can still bounce it to my hand and use it again. Now, essentially, so you'll summon it by discarding, bounce it, and then you can normal summon it or summon it by discarding again, and you can essentially keep using that bounce effect to bounce it back to your hand uh, as many times as you can summon it again. Now, personally, I don't use the normal summon ability gained from that very often, but I have found times where it's been beneficial to summon an extra frog from my hand or leave a poison draw frog face up for my opponent to run it over. But really, you're going to be using that to bounce either himself or occasionally you're going to bounce like your tribute monsters that you want to use again, like your Monarchs or like Sea Lancer or even Tour Guide, anything that got Veilered. It's actually very versatile ability that comes in very handy. Now that's Swap Frog. Now Dupe Frog, he's your searcher, and he's a really good searcher. He's treated as Death Frog while facing him in the field, which I don't really take care of it, but some people like to use Death Croaking with it. But your opponent can select the mother monster as an attack target, so he'll absorb attacks, and then 2 of them makes a lock, like a lot of those cards do. And when he's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add 1 frog monster except for Dupe Frog or Frog the Jam from your deck or graveyard to your hand. And that or graveyard part is actually really important in Lancer Frogs because you can equip this to Lancer and then return other frogs to your hand from your graveyard. But essentially, Dupe Frog is a very beefy searcher, and you're going to use it to search Swap Frog. He misses the timing just like a lot of these searchers will, but he's still really good in that he can be destroyed. Because a lot of times, like, there are going to be a lot of options where your opponent is going to want to destroy it rather than run it over because it's actually pretty big. But you're going to want him, and he's also one of your main foods for Ronin Totem, just because you'll want to keep Swap Frogs in your deck first. But next up is Treeborn Frog, and this is the beginning version of the frogs. What you did with frogs is that Treeborn, pretty much everyone knows what Treeborn does, but during a standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard and you do not control a Treeborn Frog, you can special summon this card. You must control no spell or trap cards to activate and resolve this effect. Now, people use Treeborn Frog. They originally did it for Monarchs, and it's still that way. There's still plenty of Frog Monarchs out there, but Treeborn Frog is infinite for tribute fodder, at least once a turn. And then people caught on that enemy controller could be used with Treeborn Frog in the standby phase to basically turn enemy controller into brain controls. Because if you activate it from your hand during your standby phase, because it's a quick play, you tribute the Treeborn Frog, take control of whatever your monster you want, and then it's still the standby phase. You still have no spells or traps in your back side of the field, and there's no Treeborn Frog face up on your side of the field, so you can summon it again. So essentially, just brain control. But it really depends on how many tributes you're going to be using in your deck. Obviously, if you're going to be using a pure frog deck like I've been kind of trying to do, it's less important because you're not going to be using tributes. But like in Lancer Frogs or in Frog Monarchs, it's still good to have 1 or 2. Like in Frog Monarchs, you're probably going to have it at 2. But in Lancer Frogs, considering you're going to return it from the banish zone, 1's fine. Now, next up is Flip Flop Frog. Once per turn, you can flip this card into face down defense position, and then when this card is flipped face up, you can return monsters your opponent controls to their owner's hand up to the number of face up frog monsters you control, except for Frog the Jam. So basically, he is a sort of a one-shot compulse unless you have multiple frogs, which usually he'll go alone. Now, I bring Flip Flop Frog up just because if you're not using Lancer Frogs, but you want extra frogs for extra Ronin Totem summons, then Flip Flop Frog is your next best choice, just because he is a good disruptive card in himself, in that he can bounce an Xyz monster or the occasional fusion or synchro back to the extra deck, and basically +1 flip. But yeah, the next one is only if you're going to be using Lancer Frogs is Poison Draw Frog, and that when this face-up card on the field is sent to the graveyard, unless it was attacked while face down destroyed by battle, you can draw 1 card. So it has to be either destroyed face up by an effect or destroyed while it was face up by battle. Like your opponent has to attack the face up Poison Draw Frog. You can't set it because then it won't work. You can draw a card. Now the point you use this in Lancer Frogs is that you use this as Ronin Totem fodder to banish it and then equip it to Lancer. So when Lancer would be destroyed, it destroys the Poison Draw Frog and then draw a card. But I can get into Lancer's effect later in that episode when I get to it. But that's the kind of difference. It's like if you want extra frogs and you're running Lancer, you run Poison. If you want extra frogs and you're not running Lancer, you run Flip Flop Frog. But next up is Ronin Totem, and it's the reason you're going to be filling all these frogs in the graveyard is that he is infinite tribute fodder as long as you have frogs in the grave, or infinite Xyz fodder as long as you have frogs in the grave. Now he has 2,000 defense like Dupe. And then he is also treated as Dress Frog like Dupe while he's face up. But you can banish a frog monster in your graveyard, except for Frog the Jam, to special summon this card from your graveyard. And it cannot be used as Synchro Monster. So basically, you're going to be using Swap to dump all these frogs and Ronins, because Ronin's still level 2 Aqua, and the Swap Frog can send him, to keep summoning Ronin Totems for either Tribute Fodders, or Chump Blockers, or XYZ materials. And that's where a lot of the magic comes in. Next up I have here is I have Tour Guide and Sengen, because getting Swap Frog to your hand is really important. And also Sea Lancer itself, if you're running that build like I am. Sea Lancer is essentially also a legal Sengen target. So using Tour Guide to get your Sengen is very important. But it also serves a dual purpose. Is that one, if you can get Sengen, but two, if you don't need to get the Sengen, you can get something very else that leads to OTKs with the Frog Engine. But I will get to that when we get to the extra deck. Now, next we have Salvage, and Salvage also serves a dual purpose in dual purposes with frogs. Is that one, you can use it to turbo frogs from the graveyard, because essentially, like, you can get 2 waters in your hand as discard fodder for Swap to keep summoning it, so you can send more frogs to the graveyard. And 2, Swap Frog is very important, and if you lose it to Warning or something, then you're going to need it back to your hand, as well as things like Sea Lancer can be returned, other things can be returned. You can return dupes to your hand to reset them and use them. That's up to you when you see the time, but I use it to either turbo or recover my either Swap or Sea Lancers. Now, Blast Up is a card that's coming out of Abyss Rising that I think actually could be really good in frogs. That's Bubble Bringer. It's essentially when you flip it, it's a continuous trap, and level 4 or higher monsters can attack a player directly, and that includes you and your opponent. So it's essentially kind of like a very limited form of Gravity Bind, because they can still attack monsters, but they can't attack you directly, which means you can kind of leave your field open. But during your turn, you can send this face-up card to the graveyard to target 2 level 3 or lower water monsters with the same name in your graveyard, and you special summon them, but their effects are negated. Now, why I think this is really good is that Swap Frog excels at sending very specific things from your deck to your graveyard. You can easily use this to return 2 Swap Frogs to the field, bounce them to your hand to use them. Or you can return 2 dupe frogs to the field, and then your opponent has to get through them, and then of course their effects are not only negated while they're on the field, because as soon as they hit the grave, they'll go off. But you can also return Ronins or Poison Draw Frogs or anything you have 2 of in the grave to basically make a 1-card rank 2. Which is just like, it's just extra shenanigans for the deck, as well as Stall, which is also really good, especially while you're trying to set up a Swap Frog and you leave an empty field. But I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna see how it works myself, and we'll see if it's any good. But onto the extra, we have the whole suite of rank 2s we have current access to, and the first one up is the very first one, and one of the best in my opinion is Gachi Gachi Gentetsu. Now, a lot of people know what Gachi does, but essentially he's just a defense blocker, but he's hard to kill, and that he would be destroyed, you'd attach an XYZ material from this card instead, and then for every XYZ material on him, all of your monsters gain 200 attack defense for each material, which is really good. Like the original combo with Sea Lancer was to banish 2 frogs for Ronin Totem, summon the Sea Lancer, equip those frogs to him, and then use Ronin Totems to make it Gachi Gachi Gentetsu. So you had a 2,200 defense Gachi Gachi Gentetsu. and then you had a 2700 attack Sea Lancer right next to it, which is really good. It just makes it a really big monster, and then it just makes 2 really hard to kill monsters as well. But it's still good. It hasn't gotten any worse from being not the only rank 2 out there. I still make it plenty of times in plenty of decks, but it's not the only option. Now the next other one is my favorite out of them is Daigusto Phoenix, and I was waiting a while for the Hidden Arsenal to come out that this was in to actually get and play with it, and I've been enjoying it since. Now it's a 1500, 2 level 2s just like Gachi. Once per turn, you can detach 1 XYZ material from this card to target one face-up win monster you control, including himself, and it can attack twice during each battle phase during this turn. So essentially, like a lot of times you're going to be summoning Daigusto Phoenix, using his effect on himself, and then attacking essentially for 3,000 if you can attack for directly. And this is where the OTKs come in. Is that if you have enough frogs in the graveyard and enough Ronin Totems, you could attach Ronin Totems to each other, send one to the grave, and then summon that Ronin Totem again, and maybe with the swap frog, and just deal lots of damage. But I'll get into how the consistent OTK gets into at the end of this. Now, next up we have Shining Elf, which I personally like. I mean, some people don't like him as much, and some people maybe think, whoa, let me sign back in then. Thought I moved cards so this wouldn't happen, but I'll keep talking. Shining Elf is a 1600 rank 2, and while he's on the face up on the field, anytime your opponent summons a monster, either normal or special, you can detach a material from him and it's not connecting. You can detach a material from him to make that monster lose 500 attack. So he's in fact a good stun monster. Here it is. So before Daigusto Phoenix comes out, he's a good beater, but essentially if you bring him out, your opponent has to summon a 2100 monster just to crash into him. Let me get back to there we go. Okay. And a reset. Shoot. Should have saved it. I was almost done though. I'll just clear this. Now, yeah, that's one of the things about the extra deck about frogs is that they each have a purpose. Now, the last one we have is number 96 Dark Mist for the rank 2s. And it's the one where it requires 3. But even with that requirement, I still use 2 in the extra deck, and I've had options where I've summoned both. Usually that's like summoning a swap frog and then summoning a Ronin Totem next to it, and then the second Ronin Totem, so using those 3 to make it. Now, Dark Mist is ability and comes into play that essentially it beats over any monster in attack, unless that monster has some sort of attack boost after the damage step or after this effect. Because he'll have any monster he battles with on either turn, and then he gains whatever that monster just lost. So essentially, if you're attacking a 2,000 attack monster, that monster will go down to 1,000, and Dark Mist will go down up by 1,000, and it has 100. So essentially, it beats over the first monster by 100. And now the thing about Dark Mist is that its attack boost is permanent. So every monster it kills and uses effect on, it'll just get bigger. I've had Dark Mist breach 4,000 attack before by attacking a 5-headed dragon back when before Future Fusion was banned. But it can get very large, and it's just if there's a problem monster you can't get rid of, you bring out Dark Mist to run it over. And it's just your opponent's not going to attack it unless they want to just waste the materials that way. But that kind of completes the thing, is that if you want defense, you go for Gachi. If you want to start OTKing or do heavy damage, you go for Daigusto Phoenix. If you want a stun monster, you go for Shining Elf. And if there's a problem monster sitting in your way, Dark Mist will come out and help you with that. Now, speaking of Daigusto Phoenix, the The other thing you can do with Tour Guide that I was talking about is to make Levier the Sea Dragon. Now, there's an OTK involving this. If it starts out by summoning a Swap Frog with by like discarding a Ronin, or making sure you can have a Ronin in the graveyard beforehand, and essentially you go Swap Frog discard to send a Swap Frog to the graveyard, and then you summon Tour Guide to go into Tour Guide or Sangan, and then you overlay for Levier. You bring back the second Swap Frog that you banished. Well, you have to banish that Swap Frog you sent for Ronin Totem. Sorry, the Swap Frog you sent from the first Swap Frog. And then now you have a Swap Frog, a Ronin Totem, and a Levier on the field, and use Levier's effect to bring back that Swap Frog that you banished. And now you have, and then use that Swap Frog to send another frog to the grave. And you overlay the Ronin Totem in the swap for Daigusto Phoenix. Use the effect on Levier because it's 1800 and it's a little bigger. Then you detach the Ronin, so you special summon the Ronin again by with that last frog you used. You attach it to the other Swap Frog, make for another Levier. Use its effect on itself, and then depending on what's your grave, you can make a Gotchi or something like that. But Levier plus Levier with its effect is 3,000. The other Levier will be 1,500, so that's 4,500. And then the two Daigusto Phoenix together will be 4,500, and then Levier will be another 36. So it's game. That's right. That is game. So that's the OTK, is that you use Levier to bring back Swap, and then you just summon a bunch. And I've been able to do it, and it's awesome. And like in the main frog build, I put in extra rank 3 stuff so I can do this more often. But essentially, that's frogs, and they're good as an engine on their own for pretty much anything you need. And if you want rank 2s, that's how you get them. All right, this is Chaos Trooper 87 signing out.